Modern gaming. It's a word almost every gamer has grown to despise. The current state of games has grown stale and bland to the point where we no longer look forward to new releases and instead go back to what we know and love for comfort from the hurricane of microtransactions and copy-pasted sequels. While every once in a while a gem flies into our hands, the storm of corporate greed continues to ravage the gaming industry. What is the reason for the decline in gaming, and why is it so common in many games today? Well, I'm here to answer that question today. While all this is my opinion, I am most likely bound to get some facts wrong about the subjects I'll talk about, so feel free to let me know if I made any mistakes or errors in the comments. Now, in order to figure out why the gaming industry is in such a bad state right now, let's go back to the old systems, the true peak of gaming. The Nintendo Wii. This was the first system I ever had and would continue to have for the next 7 years. Me and my brother played this without a single care in the world for years. An Xbox 360? What even is that, bro? No, I got Mario and Wii Sports Resort in my house. I grew up with Lego Star Wars, Metroid, Skylanders, and Mario Kart. Yeah, kids, before Fortnite, we had Wii Sports Dogfight, and it was so much better. Did you notice a pattern? These games were made for someone younger, but they were made to be complete without the need for updates. So why is it, with all our technology over the years, we still can't get to the point where we have functioning games on the day of release? There were no updates back then. You simply put the game in the disk drive and played it. I'll talk about that later. Anyways, after the release of the original Xbox with titles like Halo, Knights of the Old Republic, Psychonauts, the original PlayStation was also released with Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid, and Silent Hill, and Nintendo 64 with many iconic games. The rise of gaming began. These systems took off running into the world, and Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo would go on to develop more systems and progress further in technological advancement and influence in the world. I know this is the bare bones story of the rise of gaming, but stay with me now. The main thing that made gaming at home so awesome is you get to experience these immersive worlds, play with your friends, watch stories unfold, and do so much more for whatever the price of the game at the store was valued. Whatever was shipped out was finished and ready to play without any worries about not being able to experience the full game without paying extra, constant glitches, or just straight up getting scammed. Games like God of War, Minecraft, Terraria, Resident Evil, and Sonic did so well because they weren't worried about money coming in, because there was not only no competition, but no need to add anything more than the base game. They put effort into the design of the game, and that effort showed in the end results of the game produced. But eventually, the love of money corrupts even the purest of gaming corporations, and that was the first moment of darkness that slipped past the developers and made its way into the industry. The butterfly effect that created the tornado of evil and greed we see today started with a flap of its wings. The Golden Horse armor in Elder Scrolls Oblivion. This was the moment that the gaming industry started down the path to the dark side, a moment where every gamer was exposed to a fraction of the tsunami that was about to hit us. This was the first AAA game that implemented microtransactions to a single-player game and set off a trend in the industry for microtransactions. People who were fans of this game were not happy with this, especially since the Elder Scrolls was not an online game, so why would they even waste money on this armor that no one is going to see? It doesn't affect the game, and it doesn't make you better than other people, but it did light a fire in other companies. They looked at this and said to themselves, oh, if a game as successful as Oblivion is doing this, then we can do it too, right? Thus began the age of Microtransaction Hell. The next big game in line that attempted to sell players more than what they paid for originally was created by none other than the devil's favorite company, EA. With the release of the yearly FIFA in 2009, this was the first time EA dove headfirst into implementing loot packs into their game. This forced the player to choose between a heavy grind to get the people they wanted, or empty their wallets to get better at the game faster. The Sims was also a big contributor to this trend because of how much you could pay in order to get certain characters or stories. But the big three which contributed to microtransactions were all released in similar time frames, ironically. Fortnite, Star Wars Battlefront 2, and CSGO. These three were the pinnacle of greed which came into play, where the true nature of these companies was shown in the light. I don't think I need to explain how expensive Fortnite is because of how big it is. However, with the released version of Battlefront 2, not the finished version, and Counter-Strike Global Offensive, the loot boxes and prices for these games were getting the attention of national news for its promotion of gambling and preying on children to spend money in exchange for digital upgrades or skins that don't affect them in the slightest in the real world. This caused the companies to panic as they were facing charges for their actions, and they were quick to remove them. However, the damage is already done. The fact that if there was no backlash, they would not have changed these games and left them as is was a really bad look at all the parties involved. But the trend still has not ended with games like Halo 5, Overwatch, any Blizzard game. The main problem I have with gaming right now is the greed that every company has, and there is no sign of stopping with constant implementations of battle passes, pay for skins, and then throwing a cloak over it with, but it's free to play, you don't have to buy them. Don't make me sick this man on you. Now on to my second problem with the current state of games. This one needs no context, so I'll just say it. Release it now and fix it later. Everyone has most likely noticed this in games today, especially multiplayer titles such as Call of Duty, Starfield, Cyberpunk, Fallout, Ark, No Man's Sky, Sea of Thieves, Fallout 76, Anthem, Battlefront 2, The Old Republic, the Avengers game. Do I need to go on? This is only scratching the surface of games with the issue of glitches and bugs that rely on future updates and patches to fix the game that should have been refined from the start. Once again, this is an issue that was nowhere near the level it was in previous years for games. Take Halo 2 compared to the most recent Halo Infinite. Was this game glitch-free? Absolutely not. However, with the gap in time between this and Halo Infinite and the advancements of gaming, this should not have been as buggy and as broken as it was. I know I'm not a game developer, but still, there shouldn't be this many bugs and problems with a game released on the supposed peak of gaming consoles. Or take a good example of a polished game that was released, Resident Evil 2 Remake. This game was released 6 years ago, and it still looks good and needed very few updates to polish when it was released. And they gave you the full game and access to a whole story without the need for extra money involved to finish the game or do better. Or take a multiplayer game recently released, Deep Rock Galactic. While there are some bugs in the game, pun intended, the game remains very polished with little glitches to worry about and offers a fun experience for the player without worrying about technical difficulties or crashes too frequently. Also, another game that offers the same experience is Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom, which expanded so much on the base game from Breath of the Wild. Have you noticed something with the games that I've mentioned? They are all regarded as masterpieces and game of the year material by most people. However, this is what average games used to look like back in the day. We have become so used to push out and patch up methods that when games actually function and work normally, it's seen as incredible. To be fair, there are many more factors when you play these games, but do you see my point? Developers should have more time to finish their games before releasing them broken and mid. Top off the greed and constant unfinished games we're getting, there has also been a trend growing larger, and that is the constant remasters and re-releases of games we once knew. Through the years, this has become a bit irritating for someone who wants new and fresh ideas and games to take a genre of games and do something interesting with it, and instead companies just play off their past successes. Skyrim, Last of Us, Final Fantasy. The sad part is that some companies like Valve, Pandemic Studios and Blizzard don't really make games anymore due to this fact. They just remaster and rehash their old games, and if they do make new games, it's extremely bare bones and uninspired. The only studio that consistently puts out new ideas and games on their system is Nintendo. Nintendo really continues to make fresh games that continue to change the genre and expand upon what we commonly like in gaming, and they still make great games to this day. Sony and Xbox need to take notes from Mario games. These games constantly are implementing new features to their games while also staying true to their roots, but expanding upon the existing foundation that was made for them. Another game that does a good job of taking a genre and changing it is Nier Automata. This game is a masterpiece of storytelling, and its gameplay is so immersive and ever-changing that it feels like 20 games in one. These ideas and newer games are examples of what consistent companies can produce when they put heart into what they create. Again, I'm not saying that Xbox and Sony don't create good games or good ideas, because they do. I'm just trying to make a general point about the state of how many remasters and recycled formulas are used. The last subject I want to touch on is the lack of passion from developers in the industry nowadays. Burnout is a real thing, but another thing is doing something you used to love for the sake of money. What we are seeing in the industry right now is not burnout from being overworked, but it's putting the money over the passion these game developers used to have for these games they made. It shows in the writing, gameplay, features, and end product of the game. What used to be a literal love for the game has now turned into another paycheck. Unfortunately, it is always about the money now, Spider-Man. Games we have now lacked in story, and you can tell when the developers did not put care and effort into the end result. It's a very simple topic, but the greed and love for money eventually push out the creativity and love for gaming that once may have existed in these companies. To wrap up, I just want to say I don't hate games. I love gaming, and I love experiencing new games and worlds that developers create and put work into. But these issues exist in the current industry and have become extremely noticeable. We all have a voice in the community, but sometimes it feels like the money drowns out our sound for these corporations. There are still publishers and developers who put their heart into the products they make, but in order to fix the mass majority of games, there would be many companies who would have to redo their business practices, and that wouldn't necessarily be a bad thing. It just means games would need new strategies that are less greedy and take more time to make. I know that probably isn't going to happen, but it would be nice to look at games coming out and not have to worry about being scammed on the first day and waiting an extra 3 years for the game that was originally promised to you. The industry is not bad, it just needs to be reworked and take some time to reconsider. And maybe one day, the so-called good old days of gaming can finally return once again.